Republicans are pushing their anti-abortion agenda. We'll tell you who is behind the state's new program coming up. Plus, birth certificates in Kansas must reflect sex at birth. That decision coming down from a federal judge. What's next in the battle over gender markers? And Republicans and Democrats are clashing over school choice ahead of next year's session. What bills could be on the table? You're taking a look inside Kansas politics. Welcome in. I'm Rebecca Chung. We're highlighting some of the biggest topics across the state. Here to break things down is political analyst Bob Beatty and owner of the Sunflower State Journal, State House reporter Brad Cooper. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks.
Good to be here.
Well, we're going to kick things off with an update on money earmarked for the Alternatives to Abortion program by the Kansas State Legislature earlier this year. Now, the Treasurer's Office is awarding the $2 million contract to the Kansas Pregnancy Care Network, KCPN. It's a Kansas-based nonprofit that will be in charge of administrating the program, and the executive director is former Congressman Tim Huelskamp. I spoke with Huelskamp on the phone, and he says they're expecting to launch this in October. And of course, there are questions raised when you have public dollars involved. Some saying that transparency is crucial for a program like this. Bob, Brad, what are your thoughts?
The group, the folks who are involved in this particular initiative are people who've been involved in the abortion movement, in the pro-life movement for many, many years. And they say that they're very well connected to services that can be offered here. And so that's kind of the genesis, or the push behind it, is a lot of folks like Congressman Huelskamp, former state senator Mary Pilcher Cook, and another gentleman from Kansas City, Kansas, who was active in trying to keep Planned Parenthood from opening an abortion clinic in Kansas, or in Kansas City, Kansas. So you have a lot of people that are behind this. They say that they have the assets and the resources to provide the services that this money is intended to pay for.
Bob?
I think there's a couple things to think about. One is new data that's coming out is showing that abortions have not fallen to the degree that many people thought they would after the Supreme Court decision, because it's gone to the states, and states like Kansas still have abortion. And I think a lot of the anti-abortion folks thought that once Roe v. Wade was overturned, there's going to be this massive drop in abortions. It's just not happening. So what we're seeing is things like this initiative trying to almost nibble at the edges for the anti-abortion people to try to cut down on the number of abortions. This is one way to do it. The second thing is transparency, which you said. Brad is correct. These are people that have been around Kansas politics for many, many years. They are insiders, whether they like it or not. And so it's incumbent upon the treasurer and the legislature and anyone else to make sure that they run this program, in a transparent way. And to be honest, that it's not just sort of, a bunch of insiders sort of doing whatever they want, because it is public money, $2 million.
Now, looking at Tim Huelskamp, he was a Kansas senator before running for Congress, and get this, according to the Washington Post, last year he was linked to a Republican firm responsible for a text that went out about the abortion amendment on the primary ballot. Some calling this text misleading. If you remember, it urged people to vote yes to give women a choice. The Washington Post says the texts were crafted by a political action committee led by Huelskamp, then enabled by a right-leaning technology firm. Now that Huelskamp is also in charge of this nonprofit running the program, how could his background come into play here?
I don't think it's unusual to find a lot of these folks behind that, because they've been, fighting against abortion for years. And so I think that, again, going back to previously, I think he just helps make the connections that they want to make between women who want those services and those services.
Now, I know this issue also may come up next year. We see some states that have banned abortion, pumping millions into pregnancy centers. How big of a role could the abortion debate play in Kansas with next year's election? Bob?
That's a really, really interesting question. First of all, it seems like, if you're in Kansas, that the abortion question never totally disappears, but it can ebb and wane. I've been in Iowa a number of times for the presidential candidate, seeing what's being featured and what's being not at the national level. And this is one of those years where abortion is not being talked about that much. And we're talking about Iowa, which the Republicans can be very conservative. So is it possible that abortion is not one of the dominant issues? It's possible. I'll be interested to hear what Brad has to say about that. There is some fear among national Republicans that the abortion issue hurt them in the last election. And, you know, just in Kansas, for example, in Johnson County, I read one statistic that showed 70% voted no on the abortion amendment. So it's possible it won't be as prominent as in previous years.
And I mean, I think Bob addresses like one of the great questions I think people in Bob's line of work probably want to analyze is the connection between the vote on the constitutional amendment last August and how whether that translates into how people vote for candidates. I think many people don't believe that there's an absolute correlation that just because you voted no or yes on abortion, that on that amendment necessarily translates into how you vote for a candidate. I think people look at candidates through a broad prism of issues, whether that's taxes, whether that's health care, whether that's education. For some people, clearly, abortion is a political litmus test one way or another. But I think if you went back and analyzed what happened in August of last year versus what happened in the fall, there was a big difference. And one of that was young voter turnout. And the many young voters who turned out in the August primary did not turn out in the same volume of numbers as they did in November. And so it's really sort of hard to make a connection on a single issue amendment, whatever your position is on that amendment, and how you vote on a candidate.
Young voters, huge impact on the election. Yeah.
That's true. A difference will be, of course, 2024, a presidential year, and the turnout might be a little different. It's usually lower in a non-presidential year, which is what Kansas had, you know, the last election. So I think the abortion issue actually has the potential to bring out a few more young voters in a presidential year because I think on the national level it certainly will be stressed.
Thank you both. And coming up, we have an update on the legal battle over gender markers in Kansas. Birth certificates in the state must reflect sex at birth. What's next for state agencies? We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
Are you a business owner or safety manager? Visit us at the Department of Labor's Safety and Health Conference this month. Learn how we provide OSHA testing and hearing protection for your employees. New Sound, keeping you informed.
You think knowledge is a powerful weapon? Here, you'll have plenty of ammo. We turn intelligence into tactical success. Explore more than 200 careers at GoArmy.com.
The Manhattan Weathercam, sponsored by Cable Dahmer.
In jail? Call Janelle at Back Out Bail Bonds. Bonded fast, details taken care of, freedom reinstated. If you're in jail, you want Janelle. Call 408-JAIL. Available 24 hours for your bonding and monitoring needs. At Back Out Bail Bonds, we've got your back.
Do you need a spark to start your new flooring project? How about this? Or this? Or this? It's Carpet One's Great Room Redo Sale. Now complete your room with some of the best deals of the season. Buy one room, get the second one half off. 36 months free financing. Save on worry-free floors, luxury vinyl, hardwood, carpet, and more. Redo your room now and save. Carpet One, the easy choice for all floors.
Si tuviera que dar las razones por las que elegí Washburn, serían profesores, instalaciones, becas,
ubicación, oportunidad,
reconocimiento,
cercanía,
inclusión,
ayuda financiera,
experiencia profesional.
Bienvenidos a Washburn.
Weeknights at 6:30.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung here with a panel of experts to break down the biggest political issues in Kansas. Brad, Bob, we finally have an update on the legal battle over gender markers. A federal judge saying that Kansas can no longer change gender markers on birth certificates, striking down a 2019 agreement. The state's health department paused its practices, waiting on more guidance, and the Kansas governor's office sent the following statement after the judge's decision. Brianna Johnson, communications director for the governor's office, said in part, "It's not the end of the road. We will review the decision, including how it impacts operations and potential next steps." What do you think those next steps could be? What are the options here, Bob?
Boy, again, I'm very interested in Brad's comments, but it sure seems like these issues are going up to the Supreme Court. It seems like that's where they're going to ultimately end, and this certainly isn't the end of the road. Legal battles after legal battles. The Attorney General, Chris Kobach, what a year for him to take over as Attorney General. On one side with the governor, on the other side. And it just seems like the Supreme Court is where these are going to end up. And then that brings me back to that ruling of bodily personal autonomy by the Kansas Supreme Court. And I think we had the vote in August about abortion. We have this potential for Kansas hitting the national headlines somewhere down the road on the transgender issue as well. Brad, I don't know. What do you think of that?
Well, this is kind of a sort of a complex and somewhat convoluted issue, because I think a lot of people need to understand that the birth certificate issue and the driver's license issue are on two separate tracks. One is in federal court and one is in state court. And specifically, let's parse those for just a second. The birth certificate litigation started back in about 2018-19 and challenged an old policy under the previous governor. And so what happened is when Governor Kelly was elected, she negotiated a settlement, or her administration negotiated a settlement, and they agreed that we will allow gender marker changes, and everybody signed the paper, and you had an agreement that was memorialized in federal court. And that's the first issue. The second issue is we have the ability of Kansans to change gender markers on driver's license, and that's being challenged in state court. Now, the federal court issue, the judge made no determination about constitutionality, about whether that was legal. He simply said that the circumstances had changed from the time that the governor's administration had negotiated that consent agreement on birth certificates, that circumstances changed after the legislature passed a law that basically said that your sex is considered your biological sex at birth. There's a lot of people that have opposition to that. There's a lot of consternation about that, but the judge did not rule on the legality of that. He simply said a new law has passed which affects the agreement that the governor had previously agreed upon.
So I said Supreme Court. Are we thinking this could go Supreme Courts? The U.S. Supreme Court on one hand and the Kansas Supreme Court on the other?
Well, I think clearly in the case of the driver's license situation that is in state court, and that is where you are going to hear an argument like Bob mentioned, where you're going to hear the bodily autonomy argument surface, and the Supreme Court decision from 2019 on abortion that said that there's a constitutional right to bodily autonomy. And that's the argument you're going to hear on the transgender marker argument in state court on driver's license. The federal court issue, there's probably a long way to go to some of that, because all we've done right now is we've modified a consent order that the governor had agreed upon, and that has been, most of the key parts of that have been struck at this point, and the governor's staff and the folks who are bringing that litigation haven't yet revealed what strategy they're going to pursue now that consent order has been modified in such a way that transgender Kansans cannot modify their driver's license in a way that mirrors in a way that they want.
And speaking of that legal battle over driver's licenses, Kobach challenging another state agency there, saying state records like driver's licenses, as you mentioned, must reflect sex at birth as well. Now the ACLU is able to intervene in that case. This is expected to throw a whole other question into the conversation about the constitutionality of the law that started this all. Brad, what are you hearing as you're tracking this case?
Well, I think you touched on it, and Bob touched on it as well, is that's what's going to put us on track to probably get to the state Supreme Court, where the court is going to be asked to apply its 2019 abortion ruling about bodily autonomy to this case. Now, it's not unique. The bodily autonomy question has been applied to not the bodily autonomy question, but the question about a fundamental constitutional right has been applied, and that ruling has been applied to election law. It's been applied to death penalty cases in terms of, your personal rights. And so you're going to see that argument applied in the driver's license case. It's been a number of years that Republicans have rued how the governor gets to appoint Supreme Court justices, and they missed that boat a few years ago when they had a chance to change it. And she's had several appointments to the Supreme Court since she's been governor. So,
Bob, Brad, thank you. School choice is another heated debate. Coming up, we'll tell you what conversations could come up next year. Plus, national leaders are weighing in. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
K-State, KU. All sports.
Join us every Sunday night right after 27 News at 10.
As we bring you another exciting week of K-Nation.
Sponsored by 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
DeBackers Heating and Cooling can maintain all your home's furnace and air conditioning systems. Whether you just need a service or a completely new system, trust the professionals at DeBackers for year-round comfort. Taking care of your home for over 60 years in Topeka. DeBackers Heating and Cooling.
I'm Steve Matukowicz.
And I'm Diana Cox. Together with Washburn University,
we'd like to congratulate this month's Everything Woman honoree.
Congratulations, Jade Pyros de Carvalho. Everything Woman, sponsored by Sharp Honda, Topeka ER and Hospital, and Washburn University.
Find great authentic Mexican food at the Mexican Taco Shop. Our locations at 1901 Southwest 10th in Topeka and 419 West 6th in Junction City are always open. Dine in, drive through, or carry out. Or visit our 37th and Burlingame location. Open 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Quick lunches between 1 and 1:30, plus free coffee. 3 convenient locations, 2 in Topeka and 1 in Junction City. Take a short trip to Mexico at the Mexican Taco Shop.
Are you ready to tailgate? It's the 27 KSNT Rescue My Grill Sweepstakes. Go to KSNT.com for your chance to win a brand new Green Mountain Trek grill and 4 tickets to a K-State football game. Sponsored by Westlake Ace Hardware and these fine sponsors.
When you're on a jury for a personal injury lawsuit, what you're actually seeing is a real-life David battling the Goliath of big insurance.
Most people don't know that, because by law, the insurance company's name can't even be whispered in court.
And if the accident victim doesn't win, it could mean a life on public assistance and crippling debt.
It's one person up against a billion-dollar industry.
The jury is the underdog's last shot for justice.
And that's why Devon James wins.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. We're shifting now to school choice discussions in Kansas. U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona weighing in on that debate during a stop in the state's capital. I got a chance to catch up with him during his visit, and he's calling for more resources to help students and teachers in public schools. U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona made the first stop of his multi-state tour in Kansas. He's hearing from students and teachers to celebrate the start of the school year. It comes at a time when he says public education is under attack.
There are folks that want to make names for themselves by trying to divide public education or attack it, critique it. We're here trying to raise the bar.
In Kansas, public education advocates say money for special education is falling short. Plans to add extra money this year fell through after Republicans tied it to an education savings account proposal. Supporters of the bill argued it would help low-income students and give greater educational freedom, but Cardona disagrees.
I'm all in favor of parents having choice, but I'm not in favor of our public dollars paying the tuition of wealthy families for private schools, because that money is going to come from the local neighborhood school where they're struggling to pay teachers a competitive salary, or they don't have reading support and their students are underperforming.
Brad, Bob, school choice is an issue Republicans and Democrats clash over every year. What can we expect next year as far as the school choice debate? Will Republicans tie special education money to another bill? Brad.
I'm not sure how far school choice is going to go, and I think the question on that certainly remains to be seen. Last year, there was an attempt to pass a form of school choice legislation, and it struggled to get the votes that it needed. The governor would probably be expected to veto any kind of a broad school choice option, in which case that means the House needs 84 votes and the Senate needs 27 votes. And in the House, they were well short of those 2/3 majorities. The question, I think, is, what's the chance that they bring that back in a year when taxes are going to be a major, there's going to be a major push to get a tax bill passed. I'm not sure where school choice fits into that, particularly given the potential political potholes in like the Kansas City suburbs, where there are some very strong public education advocacy groups, and that issue of school choice might not play well in those areas, particularly when you go into an election when both the Senate and the House will be trying to keep their supermajority. So I think it remains to be seen about how much of a push they will make on that issue.
Bob, what are your thoughts on
Well,
this?
when you look at what we see in Kansas, and it's not unusual, is we see national issues on the Republican side, Democrat too, but this is a Republican legislature in Kansas. We see these national issues change a little bit, and then they get down to the Kansas level. And sometimes they're issues we haven't really expected or thought about. So school choice has also been very popular at the national level for Republicans. I think it's going to remain so. I'm seeing it in Iowa when I see the presidential candidates. Homeschooling as well. So I think we're going to continue to see it. Brad's right, though. It's a very complicated issue in Kansas. There's some rural school districts that are worried about losing students. They're losing population. And the idea of school choice, of course, is public money for possible homeschool and, of course, for possible private school, and anything that might take away students in a small rural district, they're going to be a little bit unhappy about. So I think this is one case where it's not going to go away. The practical parts of it, you're right, are the votes there. That's a question that I'm sure the governor, Laura Kelly, will be watching very carefully as well. And maybe the leadership of the Republican House, the legislature, may not want to see it get as far as it did last time.
Right, very good question. Are the votes
Well,
there?
I think to Bob's point is that if you looked in other states this past year, like Idaho and Georgia and Texas, where there were full-scale efforts to try to pass some kind of school choice legislation, and they didn't. They failed largely because rural lawmakers in those states, which are Republican-oriented states, didn't want to risk losing students and that was an issue, and that's why those states are still struggling to pass some kind of school choice bill. I think next year you're more likely to probably see legislation that determines how they count, what the formula is for counting students. And there was a big debate over whether enrollment should be calculated on the 2 years earlier or whether enrollment should be counted based on the current year and 1 year previously. And that was a major, it sounds highly technical and arcane, but it was a major debate, and I think you're more likely to see that surface and a bigger push for that next year or next session.
Thank you both. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
At 2 Men and a Truck, we'll treat you and your belongings like we'd treat our own grandmas.
Here we go! Welcome.
Whether we're moving you across town or even across the country.
Here at Performance Tire and Auto, we're more than tires, we're family. And because of that, we know how important it is to you to keep your family safe. For over 75 years, we've been a trusted name in automotive service, tires, and wheels in Topeka. You can always find us at either of our 2 locations, 1735 North Kansas Avenue or 17th and Topeka Boulevard. So stop in today and let our family keep your family on the road.
The
The story of Grace Med has always been told through its people, both those who serve and those who it is our honor to serve. We meet at the intersection of compassion and vulnerability, bringing health where there was illness and hope where there was despair. Our patients come to us bearing the weight of living in the margins, and we share the love of Jesus Christ with them by providing compassionate quality health care for all their physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. Because health restored is always hope renewed. Find hope today by scheduling an appointment with Grace Med.
Window Design and Remodeling does all types of projects, including bathrooms. This bathroom features a walk-in tile shower, built-in jacuzzi tub, tile wainscoting on the walls, and a double sink and custom vanity. In addition to tile showers, we also have onyx showers and many others to choose from. So if you're thinking about upgrading your bathroom or simply remodeling your home, give us a call today. We are your home remodeling specialists.
Welcome back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics. Brad, Bob, school choice isn't the only education issue that lawmakers will be debating next year. We've seen legislation like the Parents' Bill of Rights come up during debates and material that's provided to children in classrooms. Bob, what could we see change in terms of educational issues next year?
Yeah, I'm going to take a quick step back and say that the recent poll for Governor Kelly came out, and she's at 58% approval rating, which is around the highest of her entire, and on average, of her entire tenure as governor. And she's probably pretty happy about that, and she's probably going to attribute that to, sticking to things like infrastructure and helping schools out. And it was just announced there was a multi-million-dollar deal to increase broadband access across the state. And I think what we're going to see is certainly the governor trying to focus on those kind of things with schools. So to me, it's a real question. Is it possible that the legislative leaders on the Republican side will continue these things that could involve, not saying they will, book banning, parents' bills of rights, and those sort of, and the attack on the quote-unquote woke culture? It's possible. And some may argue it's even likely, but I think there's a growing disconnect between certainly what the governor wants to see, but according to her approval ratings, maybe even what Kansans want to see.
Brad, Bob, thank you again. And that was your look inside Kansas politics. If you want to keep up to date on all things Kansas politics, then follow us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at InKansasPolitics and on Facebook. Just search Inside Kansas Politics. We'll also post the full video on YouTube. Just search KSNT News and check ksnt.com/inside-kansas-politics for past episodes. If you have a story you want Kansas state legislators to hear or topics you think we should cover, let us know. You can email us at ikp@ksnt.com. We'll see you here same time, same place. Have a good day.